We're going to be working with the functions data file. So you'll want to open this from Schoology and save a copy. The first step I want to do is reminding you how to freeze panes in Microsoft Excel. So we talked about this during lesson 1 or 2, but I'll revisit it. So I want to freeze my worksheets. Well, I actually already have it done. But you see how whenever I scroll the worksheet, the numbers in rows 3 through 7 stay put. Under the View tab, so make sure you're clicked in cell B9, and then go under the View tab, and we'll click Freeze Panes. You'll want to click on Freeze Panes so that there's a check mark next to it. And then your spreadsheet should scroll like mine, where rows 3 through 7 stay put. All right, let's jump into working with some of the functions that we learned about throughout the guided notes. So the first section of functions we'll talk about is mathematical functions. So we've previously talked about the sum function by using the auto sum button. You also can use the function button and the category math and trig, which the sum function falls under. So let's make sure that we're clicked in cell B10. Get my keyboard to stop coming on. Okay, I'm clicked in cell B10, and then you can do tap the F of X button, which stands for function. You'll notice that up at the very top of this drop-down menu, sum appears there, so you could either click on that sum, or we can go under the math and trig and scroll. The list is in alphabetic order, so we can scroll and find the sum function. I will point out to you these I's that are right next to every function name. That gives you a description of what that function does. So, for example, sum, it adds all the numbers in a range of cells. So let's click on the sum function. And then up in the formula bar, you'll notice that we have placeholders. Number 1 placeholder, number 2 placeholder. This is where we want to put our cell references or our range reference. So I'm going to click on the number 1 number 1 placeholder. And then I will tap on cell B3, and I'll drag my square down to include B7. So in that number 1 placeholder, I want to replace it with the range B3 colon B7. Then to enter this function, you can either hit the green check mark at the end of the formula bar, or you can hit enter on your keyboard. Another way that you can enter functions is just by simply typing the function name. So we would hit the equal sign first, and then I want to find the square root of cell B10. So we learned in the notes that the function name for square root is SQRT. Before I ever even finish typing it all out, it pops up a dialog box and gives me a couple of function names that it possibly thinks I might need to use. So I'll choose SQRT. And then in the number box is where I place my cell reference of what cell I want to find the square root. The instructions say cell B10. So you can either type B10 or you can click on B10 with your finger. Then hit enter. The last mathematical function we'll work with is the round function. We want to round the value in cell B11 to 2 decimal places. So since typing the function on my keyboard is the easiest way, in my opinion, I'm going to type the equal sign and then start to type out the word round. There it is on my menu. I'll tap round. The first fill-in box, the number placeholder, that wants my cell reference. So my cell reference that I'm using is going to be B11. So I want to round cell B11. And then num digits is just asking how many digits do you want to round that number to. So on your keyboard, you're going to hit the number 2. The instructions say we want to round it to 2 decimal places. And then we'll hit enter, and it returns the rounded number. Next up is statistical functions. Statistical functions will go equal average. And just like we did with the sum function, all the other mathematical functions above, in the number 1 placeholder box, we'll tap and select the range that we want to find the average of. So B3 to B7. Hit enter. Number of filled cells, our guided notes told us that count is a function that determines the number of filled cells in a range. So equals count. And then in the value placeholder box, we'll select our range B3 to B7. Largest number, our guided notes told us that the largest number is the max function. So equals, start to type out max. And then in the number 1 placeholder box, we'll put our range B3 to B7. Smallest number in our range, our guided notes told us that was min, M-I-N, equals M-I-N. Choose min. And then I'm going to tap and select B3 to B7. And hit enter. Then we've got our standard deviation. Our note said that function was STDEV. And then in the number 1 placeholder box, we're going to put our range again, B3 to B7. And then we have our variance. VAR is our function name. Again, I'm knowing this because of the guided notes that we filled out pertaining to lesson 3. All right, so those are all of our statistical functions. Next up is going to be our logical function. So we're going to move up to cell C3. And I want to enter a logical function based on the number that shows up over in column B. So if the number is greater than 500, I want it to return the word above in column C. If the number in column B is less than 500, I want it to return the word below. So I'm going to use an if function that we learned about in our notes. So I'm going to type equals and then if. Select if from the drop-down menu. So the first fill in the blank is the logical test. This is what cell I want to test to see if it's true or false. So I want to test cell B3 to see if it's greater than 500. So if B3 is greater than 500, the truth value, so if it's greater than 500, it should return the word above. We do need to put the word above in parentheses or quotations, or else it'll give us an error. And if the value B3 greater than 500 is not true, then it's going to return the word below. Based on the number 147 that appears in cell B3, B3, or 147, is not greater than 500. Therefore, it should return the word below whenever I hit enter, which it does. And so now you can use the fill handle. So I tap on the cell, click fill, drag it down to row 7, and it automatically fills in the word above or below based on the number that appears in column B. You'll also know up in your formula bar, it actually is the if function in each cell in column C, not just the word. All right, let's move on to our date and text functions, our last set of functions that we'll work with today. So in cell B23, we want to enter a date function called today so that every time we access the spreadsheet, it automatically puts today's date in that cell. So we're going to hit equals today. It pops up, click it. You'll notice that there's not a placeholder in between the parentheses. That's because we don't have any information that we need to provide to it. It automatically fills in the information just from the function name. So when we hit enter, it returns today's date for you. Cell B24, we want the last letter that appears in cell A22. So cell A22 says date and text functions. If I write this function correctly, it should return an S in cell B24. So this function name to return the last letter in a line of text is the write function. So I'll type equals and then choose write. In the text placeholder box, it wants the cell that it's that I want it to look at. So I want it to look at cell A22. And then the number of characters, it's asking how many characters from the end of the string of text do you want us to return back to this cell? I just want it to return the last character, therefore it only needs to return one character from the right. Then we hit enter. In cell B25, I want to take the phone number that appears in cell H25 and remove the zip code. So this is a text function called mid. So it grabs the mid section of a line of text. So mid, whoops. So the text placeholder references the cell I want it to look at. So I want it to look at the phone number in cell H25. It asks me, what's the starting number of that cell? So it's 5 because of the 502. So the starting number is 5. And then it asks, how many characters does it have total? Well, there's a total of 10 characters in a phone number. So when I hit enter, it returns just the phone number without the zip code attached to it. Or area code, sorry. All right, cell B26. It wants me to take the text that appears in cell A1 and return it as all lowercase. So right now you see that it says functions worksheet in cell A1 in all capital letters. We're going to use the lower function, and then the text placeholder we should click on cell A1. When I hit enter, it will return the text functions worksheet in all lowercase letters. All right, the last function we'll work with is the concat. It basically takes separate cells and the text that appears in each of those cells and combines them into one cell altogether. So again, our function name is concat. Text 1 is the cell reference name for the first cell that we want to use. So it wants it in the order last name, first name, phone number. So my last name appears in cell H27. I'll click the 3 ellipses dots next to that, and then I'll choose my first name, and then I'll tap the 3 ellipses and choose the phone number. Then when I hit enter, I now see my last name, first name, and the phone number all together in one cell. Those are all your function formulas and function names that we'll work with.